Welcome back. Let's start with the introduction to John chapter 15. So, at the moment, I'm in a sleeper bus on the way from Bali to Jakarta. We're still on the island and we are not that far from the ferry, picking up, I guess, some more people's stuff here at the side of the road. Um, and yeah, this is quite nice, this bus actually. I think this is by far the wisest thing to do. I've watched these YouTube videos about, the trains are so great and take a train. But then you take a train from Jakarta to the ferry and then you need to cross and yourself and then you need to get the other side a taxi or something and it costs a lot of money. Same as the train tickets from Jakarta to here, kind of. And so it's kind of not worth it. But if you take a bus, a train, is sit and you can't even sleep and they don't give you anything. But if you take a bus like this, in this case, you get your own little cabin. You can lie totally down. Now, this seat can go more down. It's still just up. But you can fully lie flat and they even give you water and other snacks and stuff to eat. There's a toilet on board. There's coffee wheels. You can, whenever you want, you can go make yourself some coffee. And you get up in Kuta, well, close to Kuta Beach, and they take you to the ferry, on the ferry, off the ferry, and all the way to Jakarta. So it's now, yeah, sure. When you arrive in Jakarta and on the train, you arrive a lot closer to the city center than we will arrive. But anyhow, yeah, you can then take a taxi. It's a lot easier, a lot less hassle and stress, and it's getting here from the ferry and trying to get to where you need to go. Okay, so I'll try and readjust this a little bit and see if it can make, maybe, I don't know, it's like trying to record myself. Okay, so what is John chapter 15 about? It's the last I am statement. The one who says, I am the true vine and my Father is the vine dresser. The chapter starts with that verse. And so what does Jesus mean? What is he alluding to? During the teaching, as understand, yeah, we'll get back to all these things, but this is a big allusion to Isaiah, where God was the one who took a vine and from Egypt, and he planted it, and he prepared the soil, planted it, kind of idea, where there clearly God was the vine dresser. He did all of this, and now in this case, it's the vine that is Jesus, which is the true vine, and the Father is still the vine dresser. So I think that as well explains why they would be, if the Pharisees would have heard these words, they again would have tried to pick up stones and kill him, stone him. But yeah, like I said, by that stage they didn't care about the stoning part anymore. They wanted to make an example of him and totally destroy him. Okay. So, because ultimately, I mean, their God is the vine dresser, now his Father is the vine dresser. So, where God is equated and then the Father, so it would have been a big thing, understand, before them, and very controversial. So then Jesus speaks about what it means that he is the vine and what it means to be in the vine. And if you're in the vine, then you do bear fruit. I always remember I was sitting in a couple of years ago in Chiang Mai in the service, and the pastor, missionary pastor from, I think he was from the US, but he was like going around these parts of the world anyhow, preaching or something like that. But whatever, he was like, it's a little bit weird because in that specific denomination, people don't really preach verse by verse through the Bible, and or at least verse by verse through a text. And he was actually doing it, so I was like, surprised and kind of happy about it. But the things he was teaching through this chapter was like kind of very off, and everything he was saying was contradicted by, I think, if I remember correctly, verse 10. And I was just then wondering, if he's going to use his logic through all of this and take on this, go on teaching and preaching the same manner and with the same logical thought that is going out. What is he going to say about verse 10? Because verse 10 actually then would like totally contradict everything he was saying. And when he got to verse 10, he just said, and kind of went on to verse 11. Right? So it was a little bit unlucky, people. Anyhow, so, but this is to do with the bearing of fruit and who bears fruit ultimately, and what happens to those who don't bear fruit. And the question will arise, so can a person lose his salvation? Because seemingly people who don't bear fruit, they are like thrown out. Okay? And so we'll look at that in more detail. Jesus again repeated or spoke about this commandment that they are supposed to love one another. Jesus as well then mentioned that no greater love has no one than this, that lay down his life for his friend. In Romans, he speaks even not his friends, but his enemies. Remember, because that's all of us are Jesus' enemies, ultimately God's enemies. Okay, and as well, then mentioned that they are now friends, not just servants, right? But they are friends, which is a closer relationship than being servants. And again, speaking about not they choosing him, but he choosing them to go and bear fruit, which ultimately as well will play back into the idea of the being in him, being in the vine. And what does that mean? So then he continues speaking about the hatred of the world, that the world will hate them, right? Why? Because the world hated him. And that they are not of this world, because if they were of this world, the world would have loved them, but they are not of this world. They were chosen out of this world, and therefore the world hates them. That is the words of Jesus. He said earlier that the servants are greater than the master. So if they persecuted him, who is the master, right, then they ought to expect as well persecution. And just yesterday again, I was in a church, in the Reformed church here in Bali, and I was like telling them, I mean, it was a wonderful experience, and for the love of the people and the hospitality and just the preaching of the word and everything was just brilliant. Sometimes Reformed church can be a little bit bland, kind of, and kind of, right? I'm one, so, and that was just brilliant. I was sitting there with some of the youth and speaking about these things and saying about how so often, especially American Bible scholars, when they write their commentaries, say, we can't understand and break the Psalms because we don't experience persecution, etc., etc. And but Jesus here, so clearly, if they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. So I told them, and a thing that always comes up in my mind when they say these things is, why don't they ask themselves the question, why are they not experiencing persecution, right? Because you said if you're my servants, you're going to, you ought to expect persecution. So if they don't experience persecution, maybe it's because because they're so quiet and that no one cares, right? I mean, they're like just like the world, and therefore no one cares, or they keep quiet about their faith and they don't stand up for the truth as much as they ought to. Okay. God alone knows, but Jesus said, they persecuted me. You must say, you ought to then expect the same kind of thing.